For millennia, humanity has embraced a profound certainty. There is but one true God, one supreme creator, one Yahweh. But what if this foundational belief only scratches the surface of a much deeper mystery? What if, scattered throughout Scripture, there are subtle, overlooked hints, clues, that another being was there from the very beginning, not a false god, not a demon, but a divine presence, pure, eternal, and powerful, a being who walked alongside Yahweh, yet whose identity remains concealed in shadow. This isn't a fringe theory. It's a thread woven quietly into the fabric of the Bible itself, and yet, most believers have never been told. Why? Because this truth unsettles the core of religious tradition. It's the chapter the church skips, the verses it glosses over. Because if it's real, if this hidden figure truly exists, it could dismantle centuries of doctrine and shake the pillars of monotheism to their core. It means that the story of creation, as we've been taught, might not be the full picture, that the garden, the flood, the covenants, all of it may have involved more than just one divine voice. And this changes not only how we see God, but how we see ourselves, our faith, and our place in the grand design. So who is this mysterious being? Why is he hidden in plain sight? And what does his presence mean for the faith millions hold dear? The answers may be buried deep, but once uncovered, they refuse to be forgotten. This isn't some wild theory. It starts right at the very beginning, Genesis 1:1, a verse so familiar, it's almost sacred in its repetition. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But in the original Hebrew, something strange appears. The word translated as God is Elohim, a word that is grammatically plural. Not El, not Eloah, but Elohim. It literally means gods. Yet the verb that follows, created, is singular. The verse doesn't say the gods created, as grammar would suggest. It says gods created, plural, subject, singular action. From the very first breath of Scripture, we're faced with a riddle, a divine contradiction. Why would the Bible, so precise, so intentional, begin with this paradox? Was it poetic license, a literary device, or something far more profound? A cryptic message layered into the very grammar of holy text, meant to awaken only those who dared to look closer. To explain away this tension, many scholars have leaned on the idea of the plural of majesty, a grammatical flourish, meant to highlight God's supreme authority. But that argument doesn't hold up for long. The term Elohim shows up over 2,000 times throughout the Old Testament, and in numerous instances, it clearly refers to multiple entities, not just a single God. Then things take an even more mysterious turn. In Genesis 1:26, God says, "Let us make man in our image." That "us" has puzzled theologians for generations. Who is God talking to? Angels? If so, why would humans be made in the image of angels? Beings, never described as creators or divine likenesses? What if the answer is more unsettling, more profound? What if Yahweh wasn't speaking to lesser beings at all, but to another divine presence, a companion from the beginning, an equal, one who shared in the act of creation, one whose name was never recorded, only hinted at, hidden not by accident but by design? This mysterious figure may have been buried beneath layers of translation, tradition, and doctrine, but the traces remain, subtle, persistent, unignorable. Let us make man, the divine counsel that was erased. And then came the moment that redefined everything, the divine decree that still echoes across time. Let us make man in our image, not I, but us, not my image, but our image. This wasn't a metaphor, it wasn't poetic flair, it was intentional, a direct plural command at the very center of creation's origin. For centuries, religious scholars have wrestled with these words, trying to confine them within the walls of accepted doctrine. Some say God was speaking to angels. Others claim it was a royal we, a majestic turn of phrase. But none of these explanations fully make sense. Angels, for example, are never said to create. And the royal we concept, it didn't even exist in ancient Hebrew grammar. So what was really happening in Genesis 1:26? The answer might point to something far older than our modern theology, a forgotten divine council, a gathering of holy beings, and among them, one who was like Yahweh, yet distinct, not a servant, not an angel, but a co-creator, a second presence who shaped humanity alongside the Most High. This verse, long suppressed or reinterpreted, may be the clearest glimpse we have into a reality the Church chose not to preserve, one where the heavens were never ruled by one alone, because angels were never creators. Not once does Scripture suggest that mankind was made in the image of angels. They are described as messengers, servants, warriors, beings of purpose and power, but never as makers of life. So if God was speaking only to himself, why would he choose a phrase so overtly plural? Why would the language of Genesis be so easily misread, unless it wasn't a misreading at all? What if that verse was never meant to be confusing? What if the only reason it feels mysterious today is because we've forgotten what the ancients understood? Hidden deep within the earliest layers of Hebrew tradition is a concept that modern theology has largely buried: the divine council. This wasn't mythology. It was a framework, a reality, a celestial court of spiritual beings, Elohim, who stood before Yahweh, served his will, and took part in the management of the cosmos. Not equals in power, but participants in divine order. The very ones he may have addressed when he said, "Let us make man." And perhaps one among them was different, not just a servant, but something more, closer, eternal, a second divine being, present at the dawn of time, whose role in creation has been deliberately obscured, but never erased. In the ancient world of the Near East, kings never reigned in isolation. They were surrounded by councils, trusted advisors, royal sons, powerful voices that helped carry out their will. So if the divine realm reflects the earthly, why would Yahweh, the supreme king of creation, rule any differently? Scripture hints that he doesn't. We catch glimpses throughout the Bible. In Job 1, the sons of God gather before the Lord. In 1 Kings 22, a spirit from the heavenly host volunteers to execute judgment on a king. And in Psalm 82, the curtain is pulled back completely. God takes his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. Psalm 82:1. Many modern translations try to soften this scene. The word Elohim, a plural divine term, is often watered down into judges or mighty ones. But the original Hebrew doesn't flinch. It says what it means. God stands among gods, not idols, not symbolic language. These are real, conscious spiritual entities, beings who stand before Yahweh, not as rivals, but as subjects under his rule. He isn't threatened by their presence. He commands it, because even in the unseen realm, the king does not reign alone. These Elohim were never Yahweh's equals. They were created, powerful, yes, but subordinate, divine in nature, yet under his authority. And according to Scripture, they weren't just background figures. They had presence. They had voice. They witnessed the wounds, birth of the universe. They took part in divine deliberations. They had roles to play, until many chose to rebel. So when Genesis declares, "Let us make man," it may not be poetic flourish. It may be remembrance, a snapshot of a moment older than theology, a preserved whisper from the councils of eternity, a record not of metaphor, but of reality. And if this divine council truly stood at the threshold of human creation, what does that mean for us? Were we shaped in the image of Yahweh alone? Or does our reflection carry the imprint of something more, of the entire heavenly host, a fusion of divine intention, a design molded from both unity and multiplicity, a being forged in the likeness of more than one face and more than one will? This is the mystery the Church often leaves untouched, because if it's true, then the Bible isn't describing a solitary throne in the heavens. It's describing a throne encircled by many, a council, a kingdom, a realm where voices gather and decisions are made. And among those voices, there is one that speaks with a resonance that never fades, a voice ancient and eternal, the angel of the Lord, Yahweh or someone else. There's a figure who moves through the Old Testament like a shadow cast by a greater light. He arrives unannounced. He speaks with the authority of God himself. He works miracles, commands heavenly armies, accepts offerings and worship, things reserved for the Most High. And yet, he is never explicitly named Yahweh. He is known only by a title, the angel of the Lord. But he doesn't act like a messenger. He speaks as God, not for God. When people see him, they tremble. because they believe they have seen Yahweh face to face. But then, Yahweh still speaks separately, as if the angel is both distinct from God and somehow one with him. Who is this being? A servant? A manifestation? Or could he be the second divine presence, hidden in the language of the Old Testament, walking beside Yahweh from the very beginning? The scriptures refer to him as the angel of the Lord, but don't let the title fool you. This being isn't like the other angels. When typical messengers from heaven appear, they draw a firm line. Do not worship me. I am only a servant. They deflect glory. They point back to God. But the angel of the Lord, he never does that. He doesn't speak for God. He speaks as God. When he finds Hagar alone in the desert, he doesn't say, God will bless you. He says, I will increase your descendants. The promise is his. And immediately after, the text confirms, it was the Lord who spoke to her. It's a seamless shift. One voice, two identities. The angel speaks, and Yahweh is credited. No clarification, no distinction. As if the two are mysteriously one. Who is this being? In Exodus 3, Moses stands before the burning bush, a moment of divine encounter etched into history. The passage opens with a curious detail. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire. But then, the voice from the bush doesn't speak like a messenger. It doesn't announce news from another. It speaks with absolute authority. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. This is no ordinary envoy. This is a presence that speaks from within the flame, undiminished, unconsumed. A being who is somehow separate from Yahweh, yet fully embodies his voice, his identity, his name. It's as if Yahweh is both above the bush and inside it, and the mystery only deepens. In Judges 13, Samson's parents encounter the angel of the Lord. They prepare an offering, and when the flame rises from the altar, the angel ascends with it, disappearing into the fire. Overwhelmed, they fall on their faces and cry out, We have seen God. Not an angel, not a servant, but God, seen, touched, worshipped, and gone. Over and over, this figure returns. He speaks with power. He blesses as only God can. He gives commands, receives worship, and executes judgment. But unlike any other angel, he never distances himself from the divine. He never says, I was sent. He simply is, acting not as a servant, but as God in human form. So what are we really seeing here? Is this just an exalted angel, one granted unusual authority? Or is this something far more profound, a visible manifestation of Yahweh, taking on a second form? Some scholars label it a theophany, a temporary appearance of God in tangible form. But that word doesn't solve the mystery, because sometimes the angel of the Lord speaks to Yahweh. Sometimes he is sent by Yahweh. How can Yahweh send Yahweh? How can the one who is eternal be both sender and sent, unless this isn't the Father, but another divine presence, one who bears the name, the authority, and the glory of God, yet stands apart? Not a contradiction, but a revelation, a second figure, hidden in plain sight, walking the earth before anyone knew his name, a second power in heaven, a being without a name, yet clothed in the full authority of the Most High. He moves between heaven and earth. He speaks from burning bushes, ascends in holy fire, and accepts worship meant for God alone. He doesn't replace Yahweh, but complements him, foreshadowing something deeper, something that had yet to be revealed. Melchizedek, the priest-king, without beginning or end, long before the commandments were carved in stone, before Aaron wore the robes of the high priest, before the law even echoed from Sinai, there was another, a man who was more than a man, a king. Yes, but also a priest, and yet no origin, no genealogy, no past, and no end. He appears suddenly in Genesis 14, no introduction, no explanation, just Melchizedek, king of Salem and priest of God Most High. He blesses Abraham, receives tithes from him, and then he vanishes from the story, as if slipping between the pages of time. But the scriptures never forget him, because Melchizedek doesn't fit the pattern. He predates the priesthood, operates outside the law, and yet he is honored as a true priest of the Most High, a living symbol of something eternal, a shadow of a coming reality. His name was Melchizedek. He steps into the story of Genesis 14 like a ghost through a curtain, sudden, unexplained, and impossible to ignore. After Abraham's triumph in battle, this mysterious figure appears out of nowhere. He blesses Abraham in the name of El Elyon, God Most High, and receives 1/10 of all the spoils. Then, just as quietly, he disappears. No origin, no destination, just silence. But it's not his vanishing act that shakes theologians. It's what the New Testament dares to say about him centuries later. In a moment of divine clarity, the book of Hebrews reaches across the ages and describes Melchizedek with language that borders on the supernatural. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Hebrews 7:3. No lineage, no mortality, no human limits, just a priesthood that never ends. A resemblance, not to Aaron or Levi or Moses, but to the Son of God himself. What kind of man exists without origin, without end, without a family line to trace or a death to record? In ancient Jewish tradition, genealogies were everything. They determined who you were, what you could inherit, and whether you had the right to serve in God's temple. Yet Melchizedek bypasses all of it, as if he belongs to a realm beyond blood and time. He is called the King of Righteousness, the priest of the Most High God, and somehow he is eternal, not by title alone but by nature. And then there's the role he plays, one that breaks all the rules. According to the Torah, a man could not be both priest and king. The sword and the incense were never meant to mix. One ruled the land, the other served in the sacred space. But Melchizedek does both. He reigns over Salem, peace, and ministers as a priest. And when he meets Abraham, he brings no animal for sacrifice. Instead, he offers bread and wine, a gesture heavy with meaning, a shadow of something, or someone, yet to come. So who was he, really? Was Melchizedek simply a man, chosen, anointed, and set apart for a divine moment in time? Or was he something far more mysterious? Something that doesn't fit into our categories of prophet, angel, or mortal priest? The writer of Hebrews doesn't leave the door open to vague symbolism. He doesn't say Melchizedek represented the Son of God. He says he resembled him in being, in nature, in eternal presence. Some of the early church fathers took that seriously. They believed Melchizedek was no ordinary man, but the pre-incarnate Christ, walking the earth long before Bethlehem, long before the virgin birth, long before anyone knew the name Jesus. A divine figure outside of time, veiled in the likeness of flesh. Others suggested he was a heavenly priest, an eternal emissary sent from above, who stepped briefly into our story, just long enough to mark a prophetic path, a being not born of man, but sent. And then there's the silence that follows. Melchizedek does not die. There's no record of burial, no age given, no farewell scene. He enters, and he exits, like a figure who was never meant to stay long, like someone who didn't belong entirely to this world. And that's exactly why Melchizedek unsettles centuries of tradition. Because if he wasn't just a man, if he was eternal, then he wasn't simply performing a role. He was manifesting a reality, a divine presence walking the earth, holding bread and wine before Jesus ever broke it, wearing a king's crown before thorns ever pierced his brow. And if he never died, then where is he now? Watching, waiting, or still walking among us? A war between powers, two divine forces in conflict. If the heavens were truly ruled by a single solitary throne, uncontested, unified, then the Bible would read like one seamless command, one will, one direction, one voice. But it doesn't. Scattered throughout Scripture are moments that feel like tremors from another realm, disagreements, delays, heavenly messengers hindered, divine decrees overturned. They don't sound like a monologue from one sovereign ruler. They sound like something else, like the echoes of conflict in a kingdom divided, a realm where more than one divine force operates, and not all of them agree. In the book of Daniel, we witness something that shatters the clean, ordered image of heaven. Daniel fasts and pleads for understanding for 3 full weeks, and when the angel finally appears, breathless and late, his words are nothing short of stunning. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me for 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. How can this be? An angel, sent by God, stopped, blocked, delayed by another entity with power over a kingdom. This Prince of Persia is not a man. He's not a metaphor. He is a spiritual being with territorial authority, a celestial power, locked in opposition to the messenger of heaven. And Michael, not just any angel, but a chief prince, is called in to break the stalemate. This isn't just a skirmish. It's warfare, in the heavens, among divine powers, and it's playing out above our heads. This isn't poetry. It's a revelation of structure, of hierarchy beyond the veil, a realm where authority is distributed and where even divine beings can fall. Psalm 82 is one of the most unsettling chapters in the Bible, not because it's cryptic, but because it's clear. Yahweh addresses a divine assembly. He calls them gods, Elohim, not idols, not metaphors, real entities, sons of the Most High, once entrusted with sacred duty, and yet condemned. You are gods, but you will die like men. They were given dominion, placed over nations, meant to govern with justice, but they rebelled. They demanded worship. They perverted their roles. And in response, Yahweh doesn't plead. He passes judgment, because this wasn't just a failure of leadership. It was treason in the heavens, a cosmic betrayal that set the stage for everything that followed: conflict, deception, and the rise of false gods who still whisper from the shadows. A design older than Israel, older than Eden, a strategy woven into creation itself, a divine gamble to give freedom, even to the spiritual realm. Deuteronomy 32 doesn't just hint at this, it declares it. Most translations soften the verse, replacing sons of God with sons of Israel. But the oldest manuscripts, including the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint, preserve the original. Sons of God, divine beings, given territories, given nations, not as equals to Yahweh, but as stewards. And like Adam, many chose rebellion over obedience. They became Baal, Moloch, Chemosh, names etched into ancient altars, spirits who demanded blood instead of justice. And though Yahweh allowed it for a time, he never abandoned his plan. Israel was his portion, his inheritance. Through them, he would launch a counterattack, because the battle wasn't just against sin, it was against spiritual corruption, against rulers in heavenly places. Yahweh wasn't just saving people from darkness, he was reclaiming territory, reversing the rebellion, and one day, crushing the heads of these impostors with a heel born from his chosen line. It's a question few dare to ask, and fewer still attempt to answer. Was the second power in heaven, the mysterious figure who walked through fire and received worship, actually the Messiah, long before Bethlehem? Throughout the Old Testament, there are glimpses, shadows moving just beneath the surface, a being who bears the name of Yahweh, who speaks as God, yet interacts with God, who commands armies, forgives sins, and walks among men. This isn't a created angel. This isn't metaphor. This is a presence, tangible, divine, and distinct. The prophet Micah writes that the Messiah's goings forth are from of old, from everlasting, not his birth, his movements, his missions, his appearances. The New Testament echoes this in John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, a being who is both with God and is God. It's not contradiction, it's revelation, a twofold reality, one essence shared between two persons, the angel of the Lord, the commander of heaven's armies, the priest without end, the fire in the bush, all pointing forward to Jesus, not just born, but sent, again and again, throughout Scripture, hidden in plain sight. Because the war for creation didn't begin in a manger, it began in eternity, and the one we call Christ didn't simply appear, he always was, waiting for the moment to step fully into flesh, to crush the rebellion not with legions of angels, but with a crown of thorns. The second power wasn't an intruder, he was the plan. It's a line that doesn't just echo Genesis, it reframes it, because now we see that "let us make man" wasn't confusion, it was collaboration. The voice that spoke the stars into being wasn't alone. The Word was there, active, living, divine. And this Word, this second presence, didn't remain distant. He became flesh. He stepped into the very world shaped by his voice, The one who once appeared as fire, as bread, as a mysterious king, now walked as a man. Jesus, not a new God, not a break from Yahweh, but Yahweh revealed, Yahweh embodied. The second power, not in rebellion, but in perfect unity, sent not to destroy the fallen rulers, but to redeem the broken image in which man was made, to restore what the divine council lost, to reclaim the nations from corrupt powers, not with thunder, but with love. The story of Scripture isn't about one God learning to share. It's about one God revealing himself through more than one face. Father, Word, Spirit, each distinct, each divine, each participating in a rescue plan as old as creation itself. The mystery was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be revealed. And now, it has been. Before the manger, before Bethlehem, before the name Jesus was ever spoken aloud, he was there, walking in Eden's twilight, wrestling with Jacob by the river, speaking with Moses face to face. He didn't come into existence in the New Testament. He stepped into visibility. The early church didn't see Christ as a last-minute solution to human sin. They saw him as the thread tying all of Scripture together, the Logos, the Word, present in creation, present in covenant, present in judgment and mercy alike. He was the commander of the Lord's armies who stood before Joshua, the mysterious fourth figure in the furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the rock that followed Israel in the wilderness. Every appearance, every whisper, was a shadow of the incarnation to come, the invisible made visible, the eternal stepping into time, not as a new being, but as the same presence now wearing flesh. And if that's true, then Christ isn't just the center of the New Testament. He is the hidden cornerstone of the entire Bible. Always there, always moving, waiting for the fullness of time to reveal what had been true all along, that God himself would come, not just to visit, but to dwell, a divine presence from the very first breath of time, moving with the Most High, veiled not in absence but in purpose. This is why Jesus could declare, "Before Abraham was born, I am." Not arrogance, not metaphor, but revelation, the unveiling of a truth older than language. He wasn't stepping into the story for the first time. He was stepping out of the shadows, the very same who wrestled Jacob until dawn, who spoke from flames that burned but did not consume, who stood in the furnace as Babylon watched in disbelief, who broke bread and poured wine in Salem long before the covenant at Sinai, the commander of celestial armies, the Word in motion, the one who had always been near, guiding, guarding, and judging, though never fully seen. And when the veil of history had thinned enough, he descended, not to dominate the powers who had corrupted the nations, but to undo them, not by conquest, but by sacrifice, not with the roar of heaven, but with the stillness of death, because the second wasn't lesser. He was the voice through whom the world was formed, the light that pierced the chaos, the exact imprint of the invisible, the image in which humanity was shaped. He didn't come to be recognized. He came so we would finally see what had always been right before us.